education. Society is working for research community at the national and international level to impart quality and non-profitable services. Our members are scholarly educationists from various universities and institutes of repute. Here the faculties, research scholars and students interested in the area of research are given guidance and support in how their work can contribute to the betterment of our present and future generations. Research Culture Society is conducting conferences, seminars, symposiums, workshops, training and development programs on different themes. Society has organized nearly around 40 conferences, seminars, symposiums successfully at national and international level in association with different educational institutions and published selected research papers as journal special issues and book proceedings. Society is running international level referred, peer-reviewed journals with ISSN and books publication with ISBN. Educational institutions, colleges, universities are being welcomed for Memorandum of Understanding and collaboration to organize events. Society is promoting and sponsoring educational events as well as publishing research work in collaboration. Society also offers membership. The journals associated with Research Culture Society referred, indexed and with high impact factor. Society journals are publishing research papers, articles in all fields and subjects related to sciences, health sciences, engineering, agriculture, pharmacy, commerce, management, social sciences, arts, humanities, education, law and life skills.
Good evening, participants. Welcome to the third day of the international level online workshop.
Good evening to all. The third day of our 5-day lecture program. So today we are going to see e-poetry. I just want to read the disclaimer note. The pictorial, visual, audio, video material used here are taken from various websites purely for academic and research purposes of this program. There has been no intention of economic benefit out of it or to harm anyone or any community. There can be pictures, videos, slogans that may contain odd language or ideological applications. The participants are considered adults and academically open-minded for such realistic presentation. The views and opinions expressed in the program presentation are those of the authors, speakers, and do not represent the perspectives of any organization, organizer, and organizer. Society is not responsible in any case. After all, the material comes from real sources which are useful for the academic and knowledge sharing purposes only. Thank you. Happy learning to all of us. Okay, let's start. Imagine you want to write a poem. You might pull out pen and paper and start crafting language. In the subtle and complex ways people have for millennia, the millennium people, what they have to do, they may be more likely to sit at computer. Now, you have an opportunity to enlist the computer as your collaborator to create not only with words, but colors, graphics, images, sound, animation, and gestures. In a nutshell, that's electronic literature, born digital, works that use computational media to create artistic literary effects with an expanded repertoire that goes well beyond words. This electronic literature poses new kinds of artistic challenges and opportunities for creators. It calls for new kinds of strategies in criticism, including exploring the relation between screen display and underlying code. And it presents the readers with exciting works that create boundary-breaking art in which literature joins hands with other artistic traditions. Does this sound enticing, but also perhaps dangerous, luring you out of your comfort zones, isn't it? E-poetry, according to the official website created by Leonardo Flores, is defined as poetry that arises from an engagement with the possibilities offered by digital media. It is also known as electronic poetry or digital poetry. Essentially, it is a poetic genre of electronic literature created by the mediums of online data, algorithms, coding, frequencies, photos, and other electronic platforms that can produce words, movements, and art for the public. So, e-poetry's history parallels with that of the digital computer. As technology updates and innovates itself with new additions of hardware, software, and programming, e-poetry adapts itself to these technological advances as well. Digital poetry is a poetic practice made possible by digital media and technologies, a genre of electronic literature, also known as electronic poetry or e-poetry. The technologies that shape digital media are diverse, rapidly evolving, and can be used to such different effects that the term has expanded to encompass a large number of practices. Digital poetry isn't simply poetry written on a computer and published in print or on the web. Not that. The most common use of the computer in the creation of poetry is as a word processor, which remediates the typewriter in its capabilities. J. David Bolter and Richard Gruson coined this term, that remediation, to explain the process of representing an old medium in a new one. Using the word processor to write a poem doesn't necessarily make the result a digital poem, because this kind of software is designed primarily to produce printed copies. As an inscription, technology still leaves a mark on poem, partly in the composition process and partly in how a poem looks, because it provides a diverse palette of formatting elements and language tools. Catherine Hales distinguishes electronic literature from contemporary works designed with computers for a print publication paradigm. More than being marked by digitality, electronic literature is actively formed by it. This is her own words. So, let's see the various forms of e-poetry. As Flores divided the e-poetry literary platform into multiple genres based on their internal technological origin. So let's see the first one as generative poetry. So the name itself, self-explanatory, right? This genre is produced by programming algorithms and drawing from corpora to create poetic lines. Corpora is a language resource consisting of a large and structured set of text. So it is the oldest e-poetic genre and remains relevant today through illiterate genres, such as bots on social media. Bots is like computing, an autonomous program on a network which can interact with the systems or users, especially one designed to behave like a player in some video games. That is called bots, like robo. For example, the computer analyzes a situation and places media for the viewer to better artistically understand the current global situation. You can see the generative poetry, how it looks. Generates, right? The name itself self-explanatory. You can see this. Yesterday, one of the participants asked the question. I answered that you would have, the frequency, you would have heard it. I explained the frequency poem. When you see in generative poetry, you will come across this one. So when you see that, you will understand what is it. Can you see that? Is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So you can see that. You can read this. After few seconds, the frequency changes and you will get a different set of words, a different poem. Right? So every few seconds, the frequency changes. Right? You will get a different poem. You don't need to do anything. You just read. After a few seconds, automatically the frequency changes and you will get a new poem. Yes, right? So this is the way the generative poetry works. The next one is court poetry. What is that court poetry? This genre is meant to be presented for a dual audience, humans as well as computers. It incorporates both notions of classic poetry and computer code. For example, a computer may assemble words and generate them into lines of poetry, and a person may verbally read them aloud to an audience. As long as the poem was written with coding practices, it is considered code poetry. Stanford University holds an annual code poetry slam for its computer science majors. Here is an example from the 2013 slam in which Leslie Wu coded her computer to recite Psalm 23 from the Bible. You can watch this video. Sorry. So you don't understand what is it, right? You can see this kind of court poetry, a number of poetry in electronic organization collection, that ALO. The next one is visual digital poetry. The genre emphasizes the power of visual element, the power of visual element of media, the power of visual element media, writing a poem for its viewer to read and understand. It is controlled by the relationship between the movement, the action, and the sound of the visual on the screen. This relationship determines the structure of the poem. You can see here, this relationship, you can see this relationship determines the structure of the poem. For example, Puddle by Neil Hensey uses the movement of words on an image to reflect the formation of puddle. We know the meaning of puddle, right? As I said, the relationship determines the structure of the poem. Right? You can see here now the frequency poem. I didn't close that window. Right? So every few seconds, different frequency and different set of poem. You would have seen here. I didn't close that window. You can see another perfect example of visual digital poetry. Have you, hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
The next one, stand. No, which are, but when you get the link, you browse yourself and read, you will enjoy. I think one or two poems you will get that literariness and you will get that satisfaction. All right? So
Yes.
we can see you will enjoy this video. The next genre is multimedia poetry. As I have explained more about multimedia yesterday, so seeing this image, picture, you could understand this genre incorporates audio, video, images, text, and other modes of communication to formulate poetic language. See here, kinetic poetry, multimedia poetry, generative poetry. We have different kinds, and every kind has one or two unique traits, but we cannot put a boundary line between or among these varieties, these kinds. So interconnected. This multimedia poetry, how the project works, what are the things they have to do to produce that multimedia, right? That's the thing here, the image shows that. So you can, from this image, you could see that. So everything connected, audio, video, image, everything. So the next genre is interactive poetry. So altogether, I'll show you an example, because I told you that this genre, we cannot put a boundary line. So I just want to show one poetry which has all these qualities, right? So what is interactive poetry? So interactive poetry, the name itself self-explanatory. More than interactive poetry, interactive fiction is common and commercial, right? So this genre incorporates the viewer's understanding and input calculated through their process of reading and exploring an e-poem. As a person reads and engages in an interactive poem, they click to find different pages and read various elements to fully grasp the narrative behind the poem. So, we, the digital immigrants, are trained to read poetry in a printed books. So when we read the poetry, for each and every word, we imagine, we visualize. There we could enjoy, right? So here, in this digital poetry, that part missing actually. The e-poem Gabriela Infinita, written by Jamie Alejandro, is a story that has no table of contents for the reader to follow, but rather a rich array of lexia, images, and audio files. This is the comments written by Flores, the person who created a poetry website. He has given this comment about this particular poem, that is Gabriela Infinita. And one more thing, you have to remember that in e-poem, there is no language boundary. You could see here in volume 3 a separate section for language. So there you could see different languages, different countries, people, different languages. But as far as my knowledge, I have seen even an Arab written e-poetry, but not any one from India. This is that interactive poetry, the Gabriela Infinita. So here you have the option that you can select Spanish or English. So you can see here, right? So it goes like that. Instead of scrolling here, you can go like this way and you will get to know that. So we move this. So to enjoy this kind of digital literature, there are certain technical aspects you should know. As such, I enabled Adobe Flash so that I have selected most of the examples from Adobe Flash. And there are many more which I explained in the first class itself. JavaScript, Java, Shockwave, many more. So for these things, your PC or your laptop or your Android phone has to enable these technicalities so that you can read and enjoy this kind of electronic literature. Hypertext. Hypertext, a term coined by Ted Nelson around 1965 for a collection of documents or notes containing cross-references or links, which with the aid of an interactive browser program allow the reader to move easily from one document to another. This is the definition of hypertext and who coined the term hypertext, a term coined by Ted Nelson. This genre of e-poetry incorporates similar kind of other genres like words, visual, sound, and media to create a poem or a story for the reader to follow by clicking each element. It is a form of interactive poetry, but rather incorporates sound and automatic words caused by clicking to create a story for the viewer to see. Wherever the viewer clicks and explores, does not matter in hypertext poetry. Whereas in interactive poetry, the order of interaction is influential to how the viewer analyzes the text. So that is the major, difference between hypertext and interactive, because interactive fiction or interactive poetry, there is a set of rules you have to follow so that you can understand, you can enjoy the way the author wants you to enjoy. But in hypertext, there is no such rules or regulations. When you see hypertext, you can click on your own. It doesn't change or it doesn't give any contrastive kind of understanding. So hypertext poetry can consist of words, although not necessarily organized into lines and stanzas, as well as sounds and visual images, movement or other special effects. Although the poem may dazzling with sounds, as we have seen other poems, other genres also with sounds. Perhaps of a lawnmower while the words moving, stop, Sunday and morning float across your computer screen in pseudo three-dimensional letters. One will have to be hot proceed to identify the use of any formal poetics. There are an infinite number of new and unusual effects that can be superimposed on text to create a hypertext poem. You can see here sound, graphics and video has been termed hypermedia. But usually we just call it hypertext. This one I have taken as a video instead of, going to the browser and enjoying it. I have given the link so you can browse on your own. Here I have given as a video. So the language is not English. As you know that this genre is a course in US and some of the states in US, the official language is Spanish.
Ay mis hijos, los esperan al servicio al cliente, los esperan al servicio al cliente.
Don't move! Drop the gun!
So here the video ends. Actually, I have taken this as a video because this hypertext poetry, when you go to the collection, you can do the same thing, right? When you read the poetry, you can click the hypertext and you will get these kind of, sounds and images, pictures, everything. And they have, for certain poetry or certain games, narrative games, they have options. Whether you want to see first as a video, you can see that as a video. Later, you can read and enjoy the poetry or the fiction. So here, I have taken that as a video so that when you browse yourself, you know how to read this hypertext poetry or hypertext fiction. Right. So there are infinite number of new and unusual effects that can be superimposed on text to create a hypertext poem. That's what you have seen here, right? Even though the language is not in English, but you understand when you press that hypertext, you will get some kind of visual effects, audio effects, right? So that is superimposed on text to create a hypertext poem. So each word, phrase, or line is linked to another page that defines or expands on the idea represented by the text of the poem. That's what you have seen here, right? When you click that hypertext, that may lead you to the another page, or that may give some kind of audio or video effects or visual effects. That is the way this genre. So here I have given open one, the thing which, give visual effects. This one you would have seen yesterday's video. So when you go like this, you have to end up here, and then you can begin here. So here you have to enter here. Right? You can see here the brackets. And still you can see the brackets. So when you click that, it's really difficult to get the cursor here. So when you press this one, you will get different kind of music. Right? So here again. You can read this one. A leaf falls, right? You can see many more here now. Different tunes. many more, right? This is the way it goes on, right? So now many critics in literary circles see hypertext fiction and poetry as a humorless digital postmodern joke, right? That's what even literature people, and we have been spending our years reading various poets, dramatic poets, and various transcendentalist poets like Robert Frost, Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. When we see this kind of poetry, we could feel that humorless digital postmodern joke that assaults readers with floating neon fonts and crude literary strategies. If any literary skill is present at all. That is what people here, they might have wondered. For many of them having the same kind of questions, even me. When I started experiencing this electronic literature, even now, right? After experiencing so much about this genre, still I feel, what is one element we can call this as literature? Do they have any one element to stick this particular genre? That's what the critics view hypertext as a threat to the overall integrity of literature, because most anyone without any training or editing can post hypertext poetry or fiction, even if their work does not include any traditional conventions. That's what one participant asked the question initially. That's what I said, right? Because here still it is an infant literature, and people, the literary people, literary giants, and the writers are digital immigrants. They have to learn this technology and utilize this technology into their literary world to produce literary works in digital literature. Now, what we see, how the digital media collaborate with literature and produce digital literature. We cannot deny the fact the literary qualities of digital literature when compared to traditional literature is very less. But we cannot deny the fact it is an evolving literature. The critics view hypertext as a threat to the overall integrity of literature, because anyone without any training or editing can post hypertext poetry or fiction, even if their work does not include any traditional conventions. Proponents of hypertext literature argue that online text are an original art form which combines cinematic technique with live performance qualities and is not designed to be viewed in the same light as printed literature. Hypertext has been a predictable mate for postmodern theorists. Why? You know, because postmodern theorists believe in uncertainty and that texts are open to endless shifting readings. That's what the postmodernists believe. That's what you could uncertainty by turning its back on traditional uses of point of view, voice, and sense of closure. The postmodernists have been successful in establishing a connection between the new genre of hypertext and accepted school of postmodern literary thought. So overall, the e-poetry, what do the critics say on e-poetry? E-poetry exists, but it hardly receives any critical attention compared to traditional printed poetry. We can only regret this lack of interest. But unless we would assume that the e-poetry form is a non-entity reducible to a mere story of high-tech gadgetry deprived of any literary value, we can give no single answer to those willing to valorize or reject the literary and cultural importance of e-poetry. So that's what I said. We can accept one fact. We can strongly accept one fact, that is, the traditional poetry and the digital poetry, when we compare digital poetry, we cannot even compare with the traditional poetries, you know, the quality, the literary qualities of traditional poetry. Whereas we cannot deny the fact, because it is infant literature, evolving literature, because the world is getting digitalized day by day. Maybe after 30-40 years, we may really see the literary qualities, the quality e-poetry can evolve. There are various types of e-poetry that have succeeded one another in time, and we know in on almost literal sense the places to be, that's the website, galleries and museums to be attended and visited. Electronic poetry started with the phase of generative algorithms, as we have seen, right? Algorithms, mathematics. Computers then were not used to process text, but rather to generate them by manipulating rules and variables. This was followed first by reinvention of visual poetry when computers came equipped with graphical user interfaces. Then by a period of hypertextual, that is the non-linear and interactive writing. But how should we read and how should we regard this e-poetry? How can we delineate it as a form? This question may come as a surprise. Since it is widely accepted that e-poetry is not, or at least is not supposed to be digitized poetry, that is printed or handwritten poetry transferred to a digital environment, but poetry written specifically to be read on a screen. Yet, in practice, things are not so clear-cut because it's just the beginning, 30 years old. Many e-poems are most definitely first written on paper and only then translated to the new medium. But anyhow, we, the reader, are asked to read on screen, not on printed book. Furthermore, our thinking of e-poetry falls unavoidably prey to what Marshall Lujan referred to as looking at the present through a rear view mirror. That is, our tendency to interpret the new in light of the old, marching backwards into the future. Right? He rightly pointed out, this is the new genre, new evolution. But what we are doing, we have certain set rules, already fixed rules in the last decade, last century, and having those rules in our hand, and we can compare the evolving literature using those rules. So this is like marching backwards into the future. This phenomenon is well documented and studied by many important media historians and theorists, from Lujan to Winston, from Bolter and Gruson, and many more. These are the critics and historians of this new literature, electronic literature. It is therefore imperative to try to escape from this retrospective look on e-poetry and to provide a more progressive interpretation of what it is and what it is not. In this respect, we can produce a list of regularly mentioned, the critics viewed poems. So e-poetry is not a logical successor to print poetry, but a new form. And its very appearance changes the poetic field as a whole, including the subfield of print poetry that comes after the digital revolution. So, I have to emphasize one thing here, that this e-poetry is not a logical successor to print poetry, but we cannot deny this new literary form. With this note, I conclude today's session, and we have, based on this 5-day programs, assignments. You can prepare assignments based on your observation, and the assignments topics include and not limited to the characteristic of electronic literature, the various genres of electronic literature, evolution of digital age, differences between digital and print poetry, the influence of electronic literature to print literature, and various methods to teach this electronic literature are to read this electronic literature, and anticipated problems of teaching this literature or this digital natives and so on, many such. Right? You can prepare your assignment and you can send your assignment on 25th of this month to the given mail ID. And after the course, you will get this material, and I have given here the references. You can browse it and enjoy this. With this note, I conclude. Yes?